I founded Panalysis 10 years ago, and it was done because I got fed up with hearing stupid things. And the stupid things that I got fed up hearing were things like, my website gets 1 million hits a month. I thought, well, if that's the quality of the information we've got to work with, why would we bother? There must be a better way. Web analytics has moved on so much in that 10 years. We have so many more tools at our disposal. We have so much more better data than we have had in the past. I don't think there's any shortage of tools or data. The shortage is in the people to analyse that data and the skills that they bring to the table. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Who here is an analyst in their role? One, two, couple of people. Who here engages or manages the analysts? A few. And who here is a marketer that's looking to kind of enhance their skills? Excellent. Now, this talk, because we are at eMetrics, is a little bit advanced, but what I'm hoping to impart is some skills and some techniques that you can use to better understand the data and use it in a way that is constructive. When we look at the modelling that we've seen so far about attribution modelling and what people do on a website, we're very much trying to drive via the rear-view mirror. We have a bunch of numbers and we make an assumption on those numbers about what they mean. It's a little bit like trying to think of a tennis tournament compared to a tennis match. With our attribution, we're very much thinking about the match and how we're interacting, how we're competing at this very moment. My talk today is very much more about the tournament and the bigger picture. What I'll talk about is kind of valid at the smaller picture as well, but definitely trying to give you an overview of the whole environment. I'm going to start with the theme of swans, white swans and black swans. Now, a few of you from that may have actually understood the topic of the talk already, because if you've read Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, The Black Swan, that's what I'm talking about today. It is about those random events, those things that we cannot predict, and separating those out from the things that we can control. Now, the white swans can be a little bit nasty. They can bite us, and they can be a little bit hostile. So the thing that we've got with the white swan, of course, is we've got to watch out for them. And where this concept comes from is originally a poet by the name of Jacka said, "As rare a bird as a black swan." Now that was written very many years ago, before that they discovered the New World and before people had any idea that there was a black swan. It was considered not to exist. I encourage you to read Nicholas Taleb's books, The Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness. They're very good, and I've got a few other books that I suggest that you would read at the end of this talk. We live in a complex world. Now, quick show of hands, who has more than one device that connects to the internet? Pretty much everybody. Who has more than two? Again, 3, 4, and above. There are many different devices that we now use that we connect to the internet. Who here has ever taken the time out of their business day to do something that is not business related online and then completed that at a later time, perhaps in the evening, perhaps the next day? Again, most of us. We're talking about attribution modeling. Okay, how does an attribution model work? Well, we're looking at a cookie value that is stored on a single device. As that user moves from time to time and to site, we can track them via that cookie. But in each of those scenarios that I've just described, that breaks. There is no attribution model because they're different devices. They're different premises. So what do we do about that? Well, we deal with uncertainty. And the good news is that statistics has been around for a very long time. It's a very well-established discipline. Now, I am going to talk a little bit about math today, so I'm hoping that won't scare anybody, but it is not that hard to do. You can do this in Excel. But what I want to take is some of this environmental side of things and look about the things that we can control. So we have factors that we really are beyond our control. We can control customer awareness to a degree. We can control marketing and promotion. It's very hard for us to control marketing maturity, the business life cycle, competition, the economic factors, seasonality, etc. They are beyond our control. And of course, we also have weird stuff. Who remembers Rebecca Black? I know this was actually at the beginning of the year, and in the internet, it does seem like this is ancient history now. It seems to have disappeared. Now, when this slide was taken, we had 99 million views of this teenager's video clip. If you look at YouTube now, you'll see it's more like 6 million because the numbers have since decreased. And I only knew this when I was doing the research for this talk. YouTube only maintains 90 days of data. So effectively, we wouldn't be privy to the information that we had 99 million visits today because it'll only show 6 million. But trust me, this is a legitimate number. When I took this, I think in May when I originally did this talk. Can we predict this? No, it's completely random. It's outside of our control. I don't think Rebecca Black had any idea what was going to go on. She got on the Comedy Channel where some commentator decided that this was the worst song ever made, and it went viral. And the poor girl got hate mail, etc., etc. And it didn't, I think, kind of disclosed an underbelly of our society which is not desirable. However, she is now very, very well known and becomes popular and now has contracts to sing and so forth. United Breaks Guitars. Who's heard that? Almost all of us. Same deal. An unfortunate incident on an airline causes somebody in their frustration to write a song. He's now a consultant on how to manage social media. Random stuff happens. We cannot control this. We can do our best, but we cannot control this. Now, as web analysts, what we are trying to do really is explain change. If we boiled all this down into its nutshell, we're really trying to explain what caused something to happen in the hope that we can reproduce it. Now that's important in understanding. But as Mark pointed out in response to my question earlier, the proviso, the disclaimer, the past is no predictor of the future. So we do need to be aware because what might have worked in the past may not work again in the future. Or what might have worked in the past, we may have misinterpreted, and that's really the crux of my talk today, is how do we get around that misinterpretation? When we're addressing management, however, explaining plausibly what occurred is fundamental in building our credibility as analysts and our ability to describe a situation and make predictions about the future. But very importantly, and perhaps where this discipline, web analytics, falls down, I'll take criticism about that, but I am very critical about the web analytics community in that it's focused on the tools and JavaScript code and cookies and not about predicting and trying to own the future of what the actions are that we're taking at a marketing level. If we understand the change of what one variable is dependent upon another, and we change that, the dependent variable being the one that we'll see the impact on, and the independent variable which we're going to make some experiments on, like an A/B test. A dependent variable is our control. It's the page that we had before. Our independent variable is the one we're going to adjust. What is the impact? Is one better than the other? And then to pull that down, is the green button influencing sales more than the red button? The green and red is the independent variable. The brown button that we might have had before was the dependent variable. By being able to do those sorts of experiments, we can start to learn a lot more about what does and doesn't influence it. Now, right now, the market is very comfortable with landing pages, as I understand it. But really, we need to be extending this thinking to our marketing as a whole. What is the appropriate marketing mix? What can we do? What variables can we change to cause a greater number of whatever that might be as the outcome? Now, the gap. We spoke a little bit about this a moment ago. We have multiple sites, we have multiple devices, we have multiple campaigns. We don't often, and mostly, we don't have a common key that joins all those together. We have a lot of discrete, independent events. And Jim's got a great joke, which if he hasn't told, I apologise, I didn't get to be here in the morning, but Jim, if you could tell the pony joke if you haven't told the pony joke, because the pony joke is a very good one.
It's a very old joke. There's a little boy who's extremely happy all the time, and his parents are a little worried because he's just so happy. and they go to a psychologist who says, okay, here's what you have to do to break him out of this thing. So Christmas morning comes along, and the parents say, your present is in that room, and the little boy goes in, and the room is up to here in horse manure. And that's all. And the boy jumps in and starts giggling and laughing and flinging horse manure everywhere. And the parents say, what is wrong with you? You are crazy. What is the problem with you? He says, what do you mean, what's the problem? With all this horse shit, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere.
I like that, because I think it does describe it. I mean, we've gone looking for something that perhaps doesn't exist. And we have these discrete events, and we're really struggling to pull them together. So I think we can do a little bit better than we have done in the past. The tools that we work with are great, but they still have massive gaps when it comes to this area. So what have we got to work with? Well, we have various data sources. We've got Google, we've got Yahoo, and I'm going to explore a few of these during my talk. But some of the non-obvious ones that I'd like to bring to the table here are things like the Australian Stock Exchange and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, both incredibly valuable sources of competitive information when we're trying to analyse what's going on. Let's say take health insurance as a sector. I have a health insurer as a client, and my job each month is to provide them with an understanding about what's working and not working with their site. Sales go up, sales go down. Client really hasn't done anything. What's causing that? Are sales going up and down across the industry? That's my first question. Can I see that reflected in the share prices of their competitors? Perhaps. Can I see that in the census data and interrogating where those sales are being made from the ABS? Perhaps. There's a wealth of non-web data out there that we should be exploring as part of our processes. Now, I'll just take you through some examples, some more practical things. I mean, I've spoken a little bit theoretical here, a bit high level, but some practical things. And what we're going to look at here is my partner's website. It's a jewellery website. The reason I'm using it is because I can talk about it, it's great, I can disclose numbers, and there's no offence to a particular client. For those that like jewellery, I strongly encourage you to look at definitestyle.com. It's an art jewellery site with some very high quality work. Now the problem that we've got is over a period of time, we have been seeing declining visitors. And as an analyst, this is very typically the first engagement that I may have with a customer. Why are our sales going down? Fix it. So the first thing we want to do is to work out whether we're getting the right visitors to the site and what the trends are there. So in this case, we're seeing a declining trend in total visits. Now, my job is to explain that first so that I can then take corrective action to reverse that trend. So I do a bit of digging and I look at our search engines, and the traffic from the search engines is correlating quite nicely to the curve of the visitors overall. And if I do a comparison between the previous quarter and the one before, I can see that there is definitely a significant drop in traffic of about almost 28% of traffic dropping there. And I can see that when I plot this as segments for the overall visits and the search visits, they are very nicely aligned on a downward gradient. But when I look at the search data, this is where I start to come unstuck. What has dropped? Which ranking has changed? I would see something like this in the keywords report in Google Analytics. Now, you're not going to see this. I'm not really trying to point you to this. Just look at the green and the red. That's all I want you to look at. Red, green, 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 red, red. And that's how Google Analytics is introducing the rises and falls of the individual search terms. The drop at the top, 2%. I lost 4 visitors. I gained 8 visitors. I lost 5 visitors, etc., etc. I don't have actionable data. It's too granular. So what do? I look at Google Webmaster Tools as my next point of call. Now, for those that haven't heard, and I'll be surprised if few of you haven't, but I'll reiterate it just in case, Google are moving towards secure search. That means if you are logged into your Google account, when you go to search, and it's not here by the way, it will be soon, but it's not here, it's in the US, you will default to HTTPS. And that will mean that your search terms are private between you and Google and not me or Google Analytics. Now that's a loss of information. The one place that we will still get that will be in Google Webmaster Tools. And so it's really important that if your own accounts or your client accounts don't already have that connection made with Google Webmaster Tools, that you do so that we do retain and access this information in the future. Now, if I start looking at the trends in the search patterns there, again, I'm seeing some rises and some falls, but I do notice that I've had a reasonably significant drop from the keyword "this too shall pass." Now, this was a little bit of a surprise to us when we saw this pattern, because firstly, we knew that we had a rise on this a few years ago. "This too shall pass" is a Hebrew phrase. There was a novel featuring that phrase inscribed upon a ring. One of the artists on this site sells a ring with that in mind, and we had a nice alignment between a user need and a product that we offered. We made some sales, everybody's very happy, then suddenly we start to drop. What happened? Is this the cause of that drop? And if it is the cause, is there something I can do about it? And that's the kind of fundamental of what I'm trying to talk about today. Is this me? Is it seasonality? Is it the website? What is it? So we look again at the pages that have been displayed in search, and we can see that the page in question, now this is not pretty non-obvious, but it's this one here, is the page for that particular product. And we can see it is also correspondingly dropping in terms of the number of impressions that it's receiving. From that, what do I infer? I can infer one of two major areas I could investigate. One, I've lost my rankings. Or two, the users are no longer searching for that keyword. There are many others, of course, but they're the two most obvious ones to me. And we look at the page itself. This is just to describe what we're actually looking for. Now, the first point I'll then go look at is Google Insights for Search. I can then look at the trends for that particular search keyword, and I can see that, yes, there is a bit of a decline there. If I notice that along this axis here, about the time frame we're looking at, it is in decline. Voila, I have an explanation. But is it the right explanation? And that's really what I want to investigate today. There are other factors I should also look at. But before I get back down to that, I'm going to take a little bit of a deviation. I'm going to look at some of the other tools that we have available for us to gather other data sources that we can use in our marketing activities. We spoke about Google Insights for Search. The primary use I have for it is comparing terms. So if we take, for instance, distance education, and we compare it to online studies. So let's say I'm an education provider. I'm trying to determine my pitch for an AdWords campaign. Should I go distance education? Should I go online studies? Should I do both? Very typical kind of decision that we might make. We type the terms into Google Insights for Search. We set our geographic region for Australia, and we have now some trended data seeing that distance education is the predominant term. I can then jump into another tool within Google that might give me a second perspective on this. Google offer a reading level score, which is kind of odd. Why would I do that? Well, if my target is at the lower end, let's say I'm selling a course that doesn't target people that are particularly, they haven't got a lot of schooling. They may not have gone through high school fully, or they're certainly not going to university. We might want to find out the reading level for the term online study, because that basic and intermediate group is much higher for online study than it is for distance education. Now, how this is calculated, most likely, I don't know the true answer, but how it's calculated most likely is the Fleischmann score. I think it's Fleischmann or Fleisch score, which counts the word length per sentence and how many paragraphs there are and so forth. So it's not a foolproof by any means, but it's another indicator we could take to qualify whether we'll make that decision over the other. We can also pick our competitors' sites and put them through the Google Ad Planner and have a look at, roughly speaking, how many visits they're attracting, what other sites that they're going to. There's a wonderful tool called the Site Affinity, where you can see where people went to that site as well as other sites, which again gives you background information you can start to research to find out, is it supporting my decision or working against my decision? There's also the Google Google timeline, that's it, where you can see the frequency of searches over a period of time. And in this case, we are seeing the difference between daily deals, group coupon, and online auction. If I was going to go into the daily deals business, you can see it's going gangbusters, but it has already become quite a crowded market in a very short period of time. But let's say I'm assessing that against doing the online auction or the group coupon site. I can see that online auction has probably plateaued in terms of total search. So bringing a new entrant into the market would be a risky business because the search volume has not significantly increased, which would imply that there are not a lot of new customers. If there's not a lot of new customers, our offer has to be very compelling to take customers away from an existing offer. So we may choose not to compete in the online auction space. We might choose, however, to compete in the daily deals space because it's slightly less than the group coupon space. Now, they're fairly general decisions that we could make, but the point is that there is the evidence to start looking around us to see where we can find things to support or negate our decisions. Yahoo clues, and we'll see this with Google Plus and Facebook and so forth, we can see gender breakdown. We can see demographic data now coming in here. And I've typed in the term health insurance and is breaking down the health insurance by category. So I can see how many women are searching for health insurance versus men and what age groups they're in, all taken from the data that people are quite willingly feeding into Facebook, Yahoo, Google, etc. Facebook, of course, goes without saying, getting the data from there, but there's a lot of information about that. I mentioned originally I was talking about my website getting 1 million hits a month. I'm beginning to think about changing that to my website gets 1 million likes a month because I see it as kind of the equivalent of a hit these days. What is the value of a like? What is the value of a hit? So it's, I want to be wary of. YouTube, we have plenty of stats available to us there, but only for 90 days, as I mentioned before. We can see the impact of this. We can look at how that may be correlating with our sales activity or with the leads that we're generating. And of course, Twitter is a fantastic research tool if we have the time to spend with the data, but I think it's a far better listening tool from my side of the fence than a promotional and interaction tool, but obviously one we need to watch. Now, where am I going with this? Well, data in silos is not a good recipe for good analysis. So data must be brought into context, and we must take into account when we do our analysis many factors. Not just we saw direct to search to paid to conclusion, but really we need to look at all the other influencing factors to kind of make the big decisions. Campaign attribution, that kind of level is fine when we have a narrow scope to analyse within. I send an email out, did that email lead to some subsequent action that closes? But if we're looking at a big picture of our customer base over time, we need to do the deeper analysis from time to time. Not every day, but from time to time. Now, information design principles will assist. I know it's really short notice, but if anybody has budget to do this, there is a fantastic opportunity with a course running in Canberra next week from Stephen Few. He wrote Information Dashboard Design, a 3-day intensive workshop, and $1,900. I don't know if the position's available. I'm sending myself and another one of my staff down to do that because it's a fantastic opportunity for this person being out here in Australia. Statistical tests, and this is what we'll close with in a little bit of time. We do need to have some form of formal methodology to say, is this data not just due to random chance? And when I say, look, I'm helping to prove the argument, you see in the small print to yourself, nobody else cares. You care deeply because your reputation's on the line. The management do not care. But for you to stand up in front of them and say, I'm confident that I can reproduce this in 2 months' time because I've done the research, is far better than saying, I think it might work if we do it again. Now, one of the design principles that you'll see in information design is small multiples. And small multiples, when we put them together, are great for picking up correlation. And correlation means if one thing goes up, another thing appears to go up at the same time. Correlation is very useful. It is not, however, causality. Correlation is a necessary precursor to causality. And what I mean by that is causality is what do I change here? If I turn that one up 1, what goes up 5 over here? I'm turning this up 1 causes that one to go up by 5. That's what I mean by causality. Correlation does not mean causality. An aside, if I go to some stats and see that ice cream sales are going up and drownings are going up, I can see there's a correlation there. So therefore, ice cream causes drowning. Increase of consumption of ice cream increases drowning. Obviously not true. Summer has happened, there is more consumption of ice cream, there are more deaths by drowning because more people are swimming. That's the causal factor. And part of what we're trying to do with this sort of analysis is to get beyond that, to find out not just what things change and how do they change, but what causes them to change. So we look at causality. This is the graph for flood Victoria. Naturally, there was a flood in Victoria at the beginning of the year, and it's quite a no-brainer to see that we had a spike for search queries on that. This type of approach you could see as a natural experiment. Now, what I mean by that is an economist can't run an experiment easily because they're talking about economies. They can't take out one economy and say, look, let's do this to it and see how it reacts. Not as a deliberate effort, but they can observe what has happened in the past to similar economies to see what the ramifications were of the proposed changes. Natural experiments like this, where we do see rises and falls, can lead to insight, providing we examine them carefully. Now let's look at this one. This is the contemporary jewellery. Coming back to my story before about the jewellery website, another factor with that is the decline in searches for contemporary jewellery and then a bit of a spike in the new year. Does that pattern reflect the trends that I'm seeing in that website? If I overlay the data, it doesn't seem very clear. You can see there's not a great correlation there. But however, if I run a statistical test on it, a correlation coefficient, if you want to look it up, or to look at the formal model, I can see that there is, roughly speaking, a 60% correlation between those two sets of numbers. So it's a moderate correlation. It's not a brilliant one, it's a moderate one. If I compare that to that earlier example that I gave you, this too shall pass, and I look at the chart for our traffic there at the equivalent period, same sort of situation. But if I run the numbers there, I'm getting closer to 62% correlation. So running a formal statistical test like that helps me make a judgment on which of those two is the more plausible story describing the effect that I'm seeing. Now this is the basis of the testing type of tools that you'll see, like the Google Website Optimizer, Web Trends Optimize, etc. They are all using some fairly advanced mathematics to help you make decisions. Understanding that mathematics and understanding a little bit of the theory behind it is certainly worth your while, and I would encourage you to explore it, even though I know that we're not mathematicians and stats is just, let's have a yawn and forget about that, but it is important. And that brings me to the black swan. And so that is our random event that we really can't predict, but we've got to watch out for it. And so I'll give you some reading at this point. Filled by Randomness is one of my favourite books. I recommend that highly. Black Swan's a little drier, it's a harder read, but Filled by Randomness is easier. For Economics is fun. It talks about economics and how we can predict crazy things using economics, or explain things such as why crime went down in New York, and Stephen Levitt's theory was it's to do with the introduction of the legalisation of abortion 16 years before that, so the less criminals and the potential. And the one I will draw your attention to that I think is an absolute read for any person dealing with statistics is Proofiness by Charles Seif, and talks about the abuses of data that we can often see and how we can see through them to the truth. So with that, I thank you, and I'm open for questions.